Scared for reals.
Hey, Chris O'Neill.
Adam Perry.
And we're going to be talking about Friday the 13th. We're going to talk a little bit about part 1, but mainly part 2, 3, and 4. Why, Adam?
Well, it's summer, Chris, and we're going to kick off the summer of 2024 right. And what better way with the always fun Friday the 13th movies, but particularly 2, 3, and 4, something that's never really discussed or mentioned in any podcast that I've ever listened to about these movies, or even in the documentaries that I've seen about these movies.
Right.
They all happen within a week and a half of each other.
Yeah, and watching the movies growing up, I didn't make that connection either until recently when I rewatched them.
Exactly. I mean, if you watch these movies, with a significant amount of time between them, you don't really catch it. You might catch it easier in 2 and 3.
Yeah.
But definitely not 4. But 4 happens literally right after 3. So this is going to be an interesting take on how we approach reviewing these movies. They're my favorite in the series. I do have a soft spot for part 6, but
they're my favorite too. I mean, I got tired of watching part 1 because I'm like, I'll try to rewatch these again.
Yeah.
So I'd start with part 1. I have a hard time with part 1, but I like the twist, with the mom being the killer.
And we're going to also mention before we get into this is episode 51. So congratulations, Chris. We've half the year we've been doing this.
Right.
We're already at past 50, and you're either listening to this audioly or for the first time ever you're seeing this on video. So fun stuff ahead. We're progressing.
Yes. Baby steps.
Steps.
Remember What About Bob?
Yes.
Baby steps to the microphone. Baby steps to the camera.
Yes.
Baby steps to getting more views and more clicks.
So again, thank you for watching, listening. If you're watching this, hopefully our mugs don't scare you.
Yeah. Well, before we, because I know I always forget, subscribe below so you never miss an episode.
Yep.
And we share it across different platforms, X, Facebook, Instagram. So just shoot us a message. Follow us. It's Scared for Reals. That's our handle on all social media platforms.
All right. Now that the business part is out of the way, Friday the 13th, part 2. Chris, you revisited this.
Yes.
This is stuff I watch regularly when I'm just bored and want background noise.
Right.
So
like what I do with Martin Scorsese films, you do with
these type of horror movies. So
let's
tell
start.
me
I want to talk about. We can't talk about part 2 without talking about part 1 because
of course.
All 4 of these were filmed pretty much almost back to back to back to back, almost.
Yes.
And it's interesting, just the dynamic of it because Sean Cunningham worked with Wes Craven on Last House on the Left. Mm-hmm. And he didn't want to make the same type of movie. I mean, he kind of did, but it was more of a... He describes Friday the 13th as more of a roller coaster ride. And I mean, you could tell. I mean, the movie has a lot of problems with it, and I know he had to make cuts to avoid X ratings and all that. It's just... there's a cool plot twist in there because... They talk about Jason the whole movie, how the boy drowned.
Right.
But the mom is kind of lingering in the background. You don't really see her until the end. Mm-hmm. I mean, Betsy Palmer did an amazing job. I mean,
sure.
She even said, "Why would you choose me?" Because she was in Mr. Roberts. Do you ever watch that classic Henry Fonda,
James
Cagney movie? All right, she's in that. She's in the Tin Star, another Western. And I mean, she was basically known for these comedy romance Westerns. She goes, "Why would you want me for Mrs. Voorhees?" And
well, I mean, she also was on record saying, "Well, I needed a new car." At the time.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah,
that's right. She literally had a hard time getting to the set too. I mean, she showed up. It wasn't as bad as Marlon Brando in Apocalypse Now. I don't think anything could be that disastrous. But they wanted Estelle Parsons. That was the first choice, and that would have been interesting because here's an iconic Oscar-winning face that people know, and her voice definitely is. Her voice is definitely just people know that iconic voice of hers. So I think her agents were like, "Ooh, this is too violent," so she didn't take the part on the assistant of her agent. Mm-hmm. Shelley Winters would have been too obvious if Shelley Winters was in it, because Shelley Winters at that point had always played like more intense roles. You know, she was a hard, stern mom in A Patch of Blue. I don't know if you ever watched that one with Sidney Poitier.
Seen that one, no.
You know, she was a racist mom, and she was difficult. So, I mean, you think of her in that movie, and then you see her as Mrs. Voorhees. I think that would have taken the element of surprise away. Mm-hmm. So it was interesting. Betsy Palmer, who, you know, romantic, Western, you know, comedy movies, definitely, you didn't suspect her at first. You know, she was definitely one of those method actors, they call it. She was classically trained to be a method actress and everything. So, I mean, she hammed it up quite a bit. That's the tendency for these method actors, is they sometimes chew up the scenery and ham it up.
Right.
Which is unfortunate, because it was a brilliant plot twist. Mm-hmm. I mean, first time I saw it, I was like, whoa, I did not expect the mom to be the killer.
Sure.
But at the same time, it was kind of a letdown at the same time, the way it was presented.
Right.
And that, I think the main thing is, you and I were talking before we hit the record button, that Sean Cunningham just wasn't into this.
Well, no, he was into it, but I mean,
he didn't like it though, right?
He did like it. He didn't like the sequels.
Oh,
he didn't like the sequels. You know, to him,
because he co-wrote part 2.
He did co-wrote. He has a credit, because Steve Miner, who he passed the torch on for the next 2 movies.
Because Miner was the second unit.
He was an assistant, yes. And the thing about Sean Cunningham is, like, you know, the guy knew how to make money, you know, at the time. And,
right.
And that's basically what it is. He saw Halloween and said, I can do that. And then he copywrote the name Friday the 13th before he even had a script. Before he met Victor Miller with, you know, the Camp Blood script.
Yeah.
So
that was the working title, the Camp Blood.
Yeah. So I mean, like, so he knew what he did. I don't think he knew how big Friday the 13th was going to get, but he knew he was going to cash in big time.
Right. Well, I don't think anybody involved was expecting it to go anywhere.
Right.
And we have to bring up, because, you know, doing research for this, I discovered there's another Friday the 13th movie that came out a year before.
Right.
The Orphan. It was called Friday the 13th, The Orphan. Mm-hmm. And it was kind of modestly successful. Again, another low-budget horror film. Gentle boy decides to take care of his sadistic aunt on Friday the 13th.
Huh. Interesting.
And I guess the producers of that film sued. And somehow, I don't know if anyone at Paramount paid them off or something. It got settled.
I think Sean Cunningham might have had the rights to the name Friday the 13th before that. Because before Paramount was even involved, he invested his own money. You know, almost immediately after Halloween came out in '78, he was looking for, like, what's scarier than Halloween? Oh, Friday the 13th. It's got this superstition, and he had the logo made up. You know, again, before any script, anything was, you know, any deal, you know, he basically, you know, had the logo, the name, copyright, and then just started promoting it as the scariest movie of all time. And he had nothing. Right. So he might have already had the rights to Friday the 13th, which is why he kind of got brushed under the rug quickly.
Yeah, but according to what I read, is somehow they paid off the producers and stuff.
Could have.
Well, I mean that's the thing. You know, we don't know all of the ins and outs, but that Friday the 13th obviously had nothing to do with Cunningham's Friday the 13th. It was completely different. You know, a roller coaster ride of, you know, getting revenge on a camp that allowed me to drown, or allowed my son to drown in this case, in the first one. You know, Jason would pretty much be the dominant killer in the franchise. You know, there's only like a couple of movies where it's not him, you know.
Right.
And the first one, again, that was the biggest surprise, and it was also kind of at the same time. Mm-hmm. It's I think a lot of fans of the franchise, that's like one of their least favorite Friday the 13th.
Well,
one of them.
The character Jason's become such an icon in horror.
Yes.
I think everybody respects the first movie.
Respects it, but if they have to rank them, I know I've seen online polls, and usually the first Friday the 13th, it doesn't do as bad as The New Beginning, but it's
usually. I mean, again, the three movies we're talking about are usually get the highest ranking.
Yes, they do
of the series,
and there's a reason for it.
Yeah.
So let's dive in and talk about it, because Steve Milner took it over, and after being an assistant, and it's definitely. The flow is a lot better, and obviously because the first one was made so much money out of such like thousands of dollars turned into millions of dollars.
Right.
They obviously had more of a budget to play with.
Right.
So the movie does flow a lot smoother.
It flows a lot smoother.
Even though they still had to make cuts, use the word pun, for cuts. There's a lot of cuts in the film, literally, but they had to delete certain sequences because they would have gotten an X rating as well. But I believe some of those images were on the old VHS box. If you
absolutely, a lot of them, and that was like we always talk about, the glory days of video rentals.
Right.
I mean, with going back and taking that VHS or DVD box and looking at the back and seeing pictures, and then, why isn't this in the movie? Well, I want to see this scene.
Right. Well, there's a reason still, why, so that more of an audience could see them. But it was just amazing how, to me, it was like, 2.5 star movie turns into a 3-star movie in part 2. I would say. Sure. It was a lot more fun to watch. No Kevin Bacon in it, but
no Kevin Bacon or the brilliant, creative special effects by Tom Savini. But we'll talk about him a little bit later.
Yeah, I mean, no Bing Crosby's son in the second one. He doesn't make it, But.
No.
and I forget the lead actress, the final girl in the Friday the 13th.
The first one, Adrienne King.
Adrienne King. She had a lot of problems. I guess people stalking her or something. So she, right after that scene in the second movie where she didn't make it too long in the second one, her character.
No, I mean, I think that was written in on purpose.
Yeah, well, I think that was written in on purpose, and I think she intended to do more, but she just had a hard time with the fame, and she did a lot of voice work. Yeah, and I think she still does voice work.
Yeah, and things have gotten easier for her. She's she's a strong presence on the convention scene.
Yes.
Now.
It took her like 15 years to even
like
do
Danielle Harris, who had a whole bunch of stalkers and people looking for her. Unfortunately, people get obsessed and they do crazy, creepy stuff, and it's not cool.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, Ronald Reagan almost got killed because of an obsessed fan of Taxi Driver thinking he was saving Jodie Foster.
Exactly.
It's. You can't blame the movie for that. No. You got to blame the mental illness and the lack of help that there. We'll get into that another time.
Right. But Chris, so this is the first time in a long time that you've revisited Friday the 13th Part 2. We finally do get the killer of Jason in adult form. I think one of the biggest criticisms that you do hear about this movie is where was Jason in the first movie? Was he alive? It's kind of
they make it a mystery. They make it a mystery because they tried searching for the body, like you hear about that in the first movie, and they couldn't find the body,
right?
Which is interesting, but it's he's got the disfigured look in the second one, and and
no hockey mask in
this one,
no hockey mask,
not yet, but It was to me. It was interesting because, like, before I started watching the Friday the 13th movies as a kid, everyone knows the hockey mask.
Sure,
it's icon. I even was Jason. I was Jason for Halloween.
Very cool.
Yeah, I had the hockey mask and everything.
Yeah.
So, but I was also the fan of the first Ninja Turtles movies. So I'm like, I'm not Casey Jones.
Right.
So I had to make sure my parents bought like a plastic knife cleaver.
Yeah.
I didn't have the big knife, So the Neve Cleaver was the only thing I was able to have for Halloween.
If it works, it works.
Right.
If it got the point across.
Right.
You know.
So yeah, part 2 definitely flowed a whole lot better. It was smoother. I mean, it's still really cheesy and stuff, but I think that's part of the fun of it because it had a bigger budget, but it wasn't like they had $250 million like a lot of these movies have nowadays.
Their budget, I'm looking at it right now, $1.25 million budget.
Yeah, which was a lot back then.
Which was a lot, but then it went to make on 21.7 million.
Right. Which they say is kind of weak compared to the Friday the 13th grosses, but I mean, gosh, you made a huge profit there.
Sure, yeah, I mean, for 1981.
Yeah,
too, I mean, that's a lot of money.
Right.
I mean, it's a lot of money now, but like for that era.
Right, and we mentioned I mentioned it last week. The actress who played Vicky was in A Violent Nature too. She has a cameo at the end. And it's unfortunate that her part really didn't need to be in A Violent Nature, but
hey, it's a good
people recognized her. I think that was like her first movie since. I heard something to that effect, but
that's great that because she obviously means a lot to the fans in the horror genre.
Right.
So to give someone like that a little something, it's like hearing P.J. Souls in the David Gordon Green the first Halloween movie. Mm-hmm. You don't see her because obviously her character was killed in the first movie, and you don't want to confuse the audience. But you hear her as a teacher's voice,
right.
So it's really cool that they give these actors that we've grown up watching over and over again, a little bit of love and a little bit of fan service.
Right. And my wife was kind of watching in the background the little dog and like, no, the dog does not die.
No.
You can't. That's a big rule in pretty much any movie. You don't kill the dog.
Or kids.
Alejandro Inarritu kind of pushed that to bloody limits when the dog gets shot in Amores Perros. That was his first movie.
Yeah.
Literally, like 20 minutes in, you got a dog dying. It's like, and the blood's gushing out, and it's like,
yeah.
I mean, that's shocking, but you don't want to do that in pretty much, I mean, that'll turn a lot of people off.
Sure.
And my wife refuses to watch that movie because of that. But she was happy that the dog lives in the end of part 2. So.
Right. So you had an interesting cast of characters, very diverse characters. I think that's one thing I like about the Friday the 13th movies. They're not afraid to make everyone different.
Right.
Everybody has kind of like their own personality, their own thing. What did you like about the characters in part 2?
Well, it's one of those movies I don't watch for the characters because the acting is kind of cheesy.
Yeah.
It's very corny dialogue and everything. So you don't typically watch it for that, But
but it does set up unique scenarios for them. For example, the counselor in the wheelchair.
Yeah.
I mean, that's probably one of the most iconic kills in the entire franchise.
Yeah, you don't forget about that kill.
Yeah. So that's what I'm saying is you're not watching it for Oscar-winning performances, but
right.
The way these characters are developed, impacts their inevitable outcome,
right?
And that makes it kind of unique. That's kind of where I was getting at with that.
Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like an old, mystery. They have a lot of influences. I obviously you have influences of Halloween. That's very obvious from the point of view of the killer. And then you have the music, which you've got especially in part 2, you've got a mix of Psycho and Jaws theme going through the kind of like in the background the whole time. Yeah,
the music was done by Henry Manfredini, who did the first movie.
Yeah, he did the first 4. I know that off the top of my head.
At least the first 4, yeah.
Yeah, and he's pretty cool. He's always at all the conventions too.
Yeah,
and that. I mean, the music is such an important part of these movies because, he didn't want to remake the Psycho sound. He didn't want to do the Jaws thing, but he kind of mixes them up comfortably, especially in the second one.
Right.
You notice it more. It's like, I can hear a little bit of Jaws. Better when the more heightened scenes. Oh, definitely Psycho.
Right.
So it was kind of a good blend of both film scores, I think.
I mean, of course, we see the return of his iconic the kill effect that played throughout the entire first one.
I want that's one thing I couldn't find it. I'm sure it's out there. How did they get that effect?
All right, so if you watch, there's a awesome documentary. It's called Crystal Lake Memories, and it breaks down every single movie, with the entire cast. It's narrated by Corey Feldman. Well, Manfredini's in it, and he was looking for an angle,
right,
to kind of like clue that the killer was near, and watching,
kind of lurking in the background.
As he watched the movie to find his spots, the part where Betsy Palmer is doing the kid voice, and she says, "Killer, mommy, killer." He said, "There." So what it is, he put it through a echo synthesizer, and just instead of saying "kill her," he just said "kill," and then echoed it, and then mom, and then the second part is mom, but it's just ma, and there you have it. It's
the whole iconic Friday the 13th sound.
Yeah, it came from the Betsy Palmer, like "killer, mommy, killer," and he just took the literally the first sounds of "kill" and "mom" and echoed it through a synthesizer.
Nice.
Yeah.
And of course, the sound does change throughout the franchise.
It does, but it's still the same,
Same concept.
Same concept, yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's a good thing to talk about because it's, like the Godzilla sound effect, which we'll talk about when we talk about the 70th anniversary of Godzilla later on. Tease. So again, subscribe so you don't miss an episode.
Yeah.
So yeah, part two. What was your first thoughts? Because you love these movies. I enjoy part 2, 3, and 4.
Yeah.
What about 2 struck it with you?
Oh, out of the 3 movies, I think 2's going to be on the bottom.
I think most fans would agree with you on that.
If I'm ranking the 3 movies, just these 3 movies, I'm going to go 4, 3, and 2. Mm-hmm. So
that's probably how I would rank them too.
I like it, again, when discovering these movies, you're always looking for the hockey mask. So at first, I liked it because Jason was in it. I liked the pacing, the creative kills, but it just felt like something was missing.
Right.
When you're expecting the hockey, again, before I even saw the movies, we all knew who Jason was with the hockey mask because we saw in the boxes.
Right.
And you just knew who Jason was.
Right.
Per the hockey mask. So it always felt like something was off until we got to part 3. But over the years, I've come to appreciate it a lot more. I like that you got a group of camp counselors trying to, reopen the camp.
Yeah.
And that's kind of, again.
But it's not exactly on the campground. They had to move over because they had to abandon that first.
Right.
That first Camp Blood,
yeah,
they had to move. It would have initially become the second Camp Blood,
right? So,
and of course, the big thing is no one's allowed to go into that abandoned camp, but one by one they start going over there.
They go over there, and
one by one they die,
and we have
even the doom and gloom prophet from the first one dies.
He's a doom and gloom prophet, and then we got
the peeper. He's a peeper in that.
The world's most out of shape cop.
Oh,
with his incredible, running through the woods,
running through the marshes.
Again, that's the charm of these movies. They're cheesy, they're corny, they're fun, and this is why we picked these to kind of kick off summer because it is summer fun.
And like you said, though, unless you really pay attention, you don't realize. You see at the beginning of part 3 the news flash.
Yeah,
and every single one of them, if you really didn't want to waste your time watching the first one, the ending of the first one is in the second one, and it's recapped in the third one as well.
Yeah,
for part 2, they don't really do that in part 4, which is interesting.
No, but it picks up right after.
Right.
3.
Yeah, the cops are at the scene after that whole massacre in part 3. So.
Right.
But another interesting thing is the casting of Jason, because it's like a few different Jasons in these movies.
Well, yeah, I mean, and that's the thing. There's a different Jason in every movie until we got to part 7, where we get the
Kane Hodder.
And
he's like the prominent Jason.
Well, he's he's the fan favorite. I'll tell you who my favorite is later, because we haven't gotten to that movie yet. But I mean, and that's no disrespect to Kane. I love Kane Hodder. I love the Hatchet movies. I love his work. I love him as Jason. I just think I prefer. I'll just say it right now. I prefer Ted White from Part 4.
Oh,
I think
he's a stunt guy too.
He's a stunt. Well, I mean, so was Kane Hodder, but
not as versatile with his moves.
Kane Hodder he played Jason differently, but Kane Hodder is like a hell of a stuntman. Kane Hodder, I mean, like he's on the top of the list of best stuntmen in the world. I mean, he choreographed a lot of stunts and performed a lot for a lot of movies, and it wasn't.
Name some of the movies, because I kind of remember him being a stuntman, but I don't remember all of the. But isn't it? They're just got. Speaking of Kane Hodder, you bring him up, even though he has nothing to do with these movies.
Right.
They just had a documentary not too long ago.
It's fantastic that he. Yeah, if you've never seen his documentary, the
is it something like In the Shadows or something like that?
Yeah, he's absolutely. It's absolutely incredible. It's the guy's had quite the life, and it almost didn't even pan out for him, because he was doing a fire stunt for a local newspaper, and it went wrong, and he had second, third degree burns over 80% of his body. He was in the hospital for over 6 months.
He almost looked like Jason, which is yeah, that's the thing with the people, and even though it's really, really bad, it's not a great movie. But The Fall Guy kind of pays tribute to the stunt guys,
right?
Because I mean, Jackie Chan, I mean, he almost got killed a couple of times,
right?
Michelle Yeoh got injured pretty badly, almost. For Super Cop. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you saw those movies.
Yeah, I've seen
those. The ultimate action movies. Yeah. Those are like some of the best action sequences ever put on film. But these stunt guys definitely don't get enough credit. And now the Academy Awards, they try to be relevant, but they never will be. And to me, they've lost a lot of relevance over the years. But they're trying to push for a stuntman Oscar. I
think that's a good idea, personally. But.
Well, it's like Oscars. They're just. To me, a lot of the magic of the Oscars has been lost over the past decade.
Right.
But, I mean, Kane Hodder, they should probably give it like an honorary Oscar to,
Sure. I mean, sorry, so just his stunt work alone, like he worked on the Emergency TV series back in 1977. That's
Emergency, yeah.
Yeah, In God We Trust, he's uncredited. Lone Wolf McQuade, Hard Bodies, Volunteers, He'll Survive Part 2, Days of Our Lives. House.
Days of Our Lives?
Yep.
I guess you need stunt work during the soap operas.
House, Avenging Force, The Patriot from 1986, Who's the Boss, American Ninja 2, House 2, Prison, Born to Race, Friday the 13th, Part 7, which was his first Friday the 13th. He did all the stunt work for that. I mean, I can just go on and on.
Yeah, and, we have a good idea now. This guy was...
and this is just his stunt work. He has a whole... Another credit of, Lethal Weapon. He did the stunt work in Lethal Weapon. Adam's Family Values, Hocus Pocus.
Hocus Pocus.
Demolition Man. Batman Forever.
So a lot of the action horror films, he was the go-to
He guy. Was, Spawn. He's been there. Night of the Roxbury's. Interesting enough. So this is just his stunt work.
Yeah, because he also was on screen for the Jason movies too. So
yeah.
But anyways, getting back to Part 2, and we're kind of slowly going into Part 3. The interesting thing about the first two Friday the 13th movies, the first one was filmed in New Jersey, second one was in Connecticut.
Yep.
And then it goes all the way over to California, which is interesting. For Part 3.
Yeah.
And then I think most of them would stay over out in the West.
Right. Just to, to be fair, we talked about Kane Hodder. Jason Voorhees in this movie, Unmasked, was played by Warrington Gillette. the mask version of Jason Voorhees was played by Steve. I'm going to mess this name up. Disgasquez. Can you?
Oh, take a cheat
It's a
note
German.
Here. All right, I gotta find it on here.
It should be.
Oh, okay. Daskowitz.
Yeah.
Sounds like a Polish kind of name.
Yeah. So we had 2 Jasons in this movie. I mean, we just talked to Hodder and
in the third one, I think the Jason was more of a athlete.
Yeah.
And he did some fancy footwork because he was an athlete. Mm-hmm. But they had to like kind of, if I'm not mistaken, in the third one, the guy who played Jason, they had to pad him out because he was kind of not scrawny, but he wasn't like muscular like Kane Hodder. You know? Kane Hodder is like the ultimate rugged beast of Jason.
Well, yeah, he became like the monster.
But that was the thing in part 3. 6'3", he was very athletic, but he didn't have the prowess, so they had to pad out his clothing and everything. That's from what I understand.
Yeah. All right. Well, so just wrapping up part 2. I mean,
yes.
Is there anything else you would like to see before we go to part 3?
No, I think I summed it up. It's still corny, cheesy, but it's a lot of fun to watch. I kind of put like Top Gun in the same.
Okay. Cool.
Same thing as some of the cheesiest. I think that's the thing. Jason wasn't trying to be anything but like low budget and everything. Top Gun, you had prominent director and everything like that. And some of the dialogue for Top Gun is like some of the most awful, corny, cheesy dialogue. Whereas like Friday the 13th, it's kind of almost meant to be cheesy,
right?
So that's the thing. That's why I'm not so hard on part 2, part 3, and part 4 because it didn't try to be anything but like a B movie. It wasn't trying to be prestigious. I mean, these are slasher movies,
right?
They're not artsy, meant to be like Terrence Malick and that was the thing, in A Violent Nature, which is the latest slasher flick. You got little bits of Tarkovsky, you got a little bit of Terrence Malick in there, and Gus Van Sant, I guess. But it's definitely a slasher movie, and the director, Chris Nash, didn't lose focus of that.
Right.
And same with these guys too. I mean, they knew what they were doing. Mm-hmm. They weren't trying to. I know Sean Cunningham. That kind of the Oscar kind of clouded his vision quite a bit throughout his career.
Right.
But they weren't trying to make an Oscar movie. You know?
Well, I mean, all right. So we'll get into Friday the 13th part 3 right now.
3D.
And 3D. Now, 2 very important things happen with this movie. One's noticeable to the general public, and one's not noticeable unless you know the history of Friday the 13th. Number 1, obviously, we finally get our hockey mask.
The hockey mask. It takes about 45 minutes to an hour.
Yeah,
but
the iconic Jason Voorhees hockey mask. Number 2, Frank Mancuso Jr., all right, the producer of Paramount, because after this movie, this is his first time producing Friday the 13th. After this, basically everybody who was originally involved with Friday the 13th kind of takes a step back.
Right.
And he, for the rest of the movies that are done at Paramount, is under him. So he is responsible for what we have next. Up until Jason Takes Manhattan.
Right. So this was supposed to be, it was unofficially the final Friday the 13th. It was supposed to be like a trilogy, but it wasn't in the moniker as like a trilogy. But, that's why we had to bring up the first one before we talked about 2, 3, and 4, because these first 4 movies have an arc to them.
Right.
So part 3, yes. I mean, I don't have 3D glasses, and there wasn't a lot of theaters really had to change because it wasn't a big thing at the time having 3D movies. I mean, there were some in the 50s.
Yeah.
Because
it started to make a comeback, but not like it did in the late 50s.
No, because like afterwards, I think Piranha would be in 3D, and there was some interesting
Jaws
B movies.
3D.
Yeah, Jaws. Oh gosh, we'll talk about Jaws some other time. But yeah, that's the thing. It wasn't huge like it was in the 50s and 60s because 50s and 60s TV was introduced, and they're like, we got to keep people coming to the theaters and create excitement. So I wish they would do that now, but Hollywood's really not doing that now with
not really.
But yeah, they made kind of a semi comeback in the 80s.
Yes. Not as big as it did in the in the 2000s, but I mean it had a little splash. Like it seemed like in the early 2000s, if it wasn't a remake, it was in 3D.
Right, and in that for a while they were forcing 3D in movies, and it was we'll talk about
that's
like a 3D.
That's a whole nother.
We could actually
topic.
do a whole show about 3D movies. Yeah, and how
they're prominent in the horror genre.
Yeah,
they're very prominent. Yeah, starting with Creature from the Black Lagoon.
Yeah,
yeah,
that was originally 3D.
Yep.
But yeah, I love the gimmicks of this one. Even if you don't have 3D, you can appreciate the close-ups of the body part insect at the beginning, or the bum shows them
the eyeball.
The eyeball with a like an insect or something.
Yeah,
and it just like shoves it right in front of the camera.
And the snake leaping out at you. When the guy goes to put the rabbit back in its cage.
And, just like things just like being pointed right directly at the camera. Whether it's just like a side thrust or like Jason doing something like close up of the stabbing someone or
right.
So it was gimmicky fun, but I guess all that was left after the movie had been released and everything was like some theater in Canada had the only 3D video copy.
Oh, really? Well, I know when they released that massive box set a couple years ago.
Oh, the Scream Factory one.
There is a disc. You can watch it through 3D, and the box set came with glasses.
Well, and the one that you let me borrow, there is a 3D version on there too.
Yeah. So, all right. So, Friday the 13th, Part 3 picks up literally as we're leaving the crime scene of Part 2.
Right. And Amy Steele was supposed to come back. They were going to have a whole thing in an institution.
Yeah.
Of Jason getting revenge. So it was like it was going to be like Jason in the mental institution.
Right.
But she declined to come back. She was going to be in a psychiatric ward or something like that. And she actually regrets not taking that role because she tried to, wanted to do more with her career than just be known as a scream queen, final girl in Jason Friday the 13th Part 2, But again, no, everyone remembers Amy Steele from Part 2. She did nothing of a huge prominence after Friday the 13th Part 2.
Right.
So.
Well, unfortunately, not a lot of these actors, with the exception of Kevin Bacon, really.
And I forgot to mention they wanted Sally Field in the first one. Did you know that?
Yeah, I knew that.
A little too prestigious for.
Sally Field,
Oscar-winning actress at the time, But anyway.
But yeah, so picks up literally as the police are responding to the carnage of the second movie.
Right.
Jason slips away, murders a local, grocery store, mom and pop shop, and kind of a funny banter, banter between the two of them. But they both, meet their ends by Jason.
Him sneaking some junk food in the. And it's like
every married man can relate to that.
Yeah. Yeah. How do those peanuts get back in your bag, Chris?
Right. So the news story picks up with Chris, played by Dana Kimmel, and her and her friends. Apparently, her family owns a cottage/farm right next to Camp Crystal Lake, and they're going up for a weekend of fun.
Right.
Again, we get another like really interesting, diverse. You have Chris, who's super uptight and kind of nervous about being there.
Well, that's the thing, and they cut that part out. Apparently, there's a whole story arc where she's like raped by Jason.
Yeah, they do
that concept kind of disappeared. They show a little bit of it
for being attacked, but the rape. Yeah.
But if they left that in there, I know it would have been even more shocking, but it would have made more sense of why she's so uptight and like around everybody. Because the poor girl was raped by this literal beast of a he can't really superhuman being,
Yeah.
He literally like violates her, and that is such a shock. it would have been cool if they left it in, but the tone would have been completely different.
Yeah.
Which I kind of wish they'd left that in, to be honest. I think it would have made for a more powerful film.
Sure.
But again, you got to open this up to a mass appeal, and you're already cutting some of that mass audience appeal out because little kids can't watch it.
Right.
So if you put in an X, that definitely makes it
it hurts it.
It hurts getting it distributed to theaters because a lot of theaters won't touch an X movie.
Absolutely. So yeah, her and her friends, again, as I was alluding to, we got another really like diverse group of people, especially when you got Debbie, played by Tracy Savage. Now, I don't know if you know this, Chris, but Tracy, after Friday the 13th Part 3, she kind of stepped away from doing movies, and she became a prominent news anchor and became really famous for covering the O.J. Simpson case later.
Oh, I think I remember reading that. Yes,
Yeah.
yes. She became a famous reporter.
Yeah.
Yes,
And,
that's right.
But what, again, another like psychological interesting take on that is we find out that she's pregnant. Now, I think it probably would have, if she was like showing her pregnancy, it might have been more impactful. But still, the idea that this woman is pregnant,
is running around and potentially could hurt herself doing some of the
it adds an interesting element. We got the Mr. and Mrs. Cheech and Chong characters to add some comedy to
the hippie smoke it up, literally you see a bunch of smoke coming from the van. They're just toking up in there. Pass it around.
And then obviously probably our most important character is in far as legacy, because he provides Jason his hockey mask, Shelley by Larry Zerner.
The practical joker who just, I was hoping because I thought I watched this when I was younger, but this was the first time watching it. I was hoping you get his comeuppance where he was actually trying to ask for help, but no one would listen to him because the guy's a jokester.
Yeah.
But
it kind of happens that way a little bit.
A little bit. Nah, not exactly. It's a comeuppance that no one really sees.
Right.
Because it would have been great to have him be cast aside right off the bat because help, it's just him being a jokester. It would have been more satisfying, I guess, if any of these kills are satisfying. That's one thing a lot of people don't talk about is Friday the 13th. I think some of the critics talk about it is these young adults, teenagers are very careless, and Jason is almost like their conscience.
Yeah.
Hey, you're screwing up.
Yes.
You're going to pay for this.
Yeah.
With your life.
Exactly.
Unprotected sex and, just, disobeying authority and, doing drugs, which are still kind of frowned upon.
Kids being kids. Shame on you.
Yeah.
But, interesting, side note about Larry Zerner, he went on to become a celebrity attorney.
Oh, okay.
And if you can find it online. So the reason why we haven't had a Friday the 13th movie in almost 2 decades now.
Yeah, because the last one was a reboot in 2009. Right?
Yes, is because Sean Cunningham and the original writer have been suing the pants off of each other about who legally owns Friday the 13th and Jason.
Is that why that show didn't get developed?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Yes. So,
because there was it was like the last couple of years they've been teasing about a Friday the 13th show, which some of the fans were kind of grumbling about to begin with. I mean, you can't please everybody,
right?
But we don't get anything now because of course, it's money. It's
always about money. Exactly.
Always the dollars.
Yes. I mean, again, because there's 12 movies.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have a 13th Friday the 13th movie. It's kind of a shame.
Yeah. Talk about a whole satire, you know?
But what I was getting at on other podcasts and when they're talking about you can look up these different podcasts where they talk about the lawsuit, and some of the more prominent podcasts will have Larry Zerner on, and him being an attorney and a lawyer's perspective brilliantly breaks down the lawsuit. So if you're interested in the legal stuff like that, Highly
I didn't
recommend.
even know about this stuff,
I highly
so.
recommend you look some of his stuff up because he really does break down the issues between Sean Cunningham and Victor Miller brilliantly and legally. You know, and he's a good talker. He breaks it down to where you can understand.
We'll try to do technology, and if we can find the link, we'll share it below.
I know. Well, yeah, I know one podcast that they're called Halloweenies. They've been around for a couple years, and I do believe they're a part of Rue Morgue's arsenal of horror podcasts. But they've had him on quite a few times when they were reviewing their Friday the 13th series.
Gotcha.
And I know I listened to it, and there's a couple other ones. So plug to those guys.
Yeah, we'll see if we're able to provide links below. We'll do that, so you guys can click on it if you want to
absolutely.
see it.
But again, so if you're a fan of learning about really the dirt of making movies and the legal stuff, Larry Zerner's take on the Victor Miller Sean Cunningham lawsuit is brilliant. I highly suggest you seek it out.
Make a whole documentary about that.
Oh, absolutely!
Sure.
Yeah, I'm sure it's coming. I'm sure it's got to be coming. And then we got Jason himself because this is played by one guy, a stuntman named Richard Broker.
Yeah. It was more. I think he was like they said he was like one of the more athletic Jasons.
He was, and I think.
But they had to pad his suit, I believe. That I was reading that.
I mean, he does look a little padded up. I don't think he looks awkwardly padded up.
No.
Like,
they did it in a way where it wasn't too awkward, but they really had
Halloween 4. You can tell the guy's wearing hockey pads underneath the jumpsuit. So.
Oh, I'm so glad I stopped watching the Halloween movies.
Oh, you're gonna watch them again.
No, I'll watch the first one again.
We'll get you there.
I watched the first Halloween. I've seen that many times. I don't think I can. I'll sit through the Rob Zombie ones again, but I tried watching Halloween 2, and then I skipped over. I do. Okay, if we do a Halloween thing, I will watch 3 somehow. I don't have it, but I'll try to watch it because that one I heard is interesting.
Yes,
but I saw Halloween 5, and that was it. I don't need to see any more. I really don't.
All right. Well,
anyway,
we're talking Friday the 13th. We'll cross the Halloween bridge.
Yeah, so let's continue with Halloween or Friday the 13th Part 3. Any other thoughts about that?
Well, this what I love most about this one and the next one. I like that Jason isn't the monster stalking. He chases after him. He puts an effort into trying to kill these kids. Yeah, and I enjoy.
He jumps. He runs. Leaps.
Yeah. And then we get a cameo once again from Betsy Palmer.
Yeah.
So, what did you think about it, Chris? This is literally your first time watching.
Yeah,
you don't
because
remember watching it.
I thought I did watch it when I was younger, but apparently 3 just. I don't know what happened. I guess it wasn't on. Because I used to record. That was the thing. My parents gruntingly didn't mind if I used their VCR player, and I'd hit record. So I recorded what I thought was a good chunk of the Friday the 13th movies, but I guess Part 3 wasn't in there because I'm like, I haven't seen this before.
Wow. So you were pleasantly surprised, or?
Well, I wasn't surprised. I knew I was going to get,
right.
But it was a lot better than what I was expecting because I really stopped liking them after Part 4.
Right.
Because I remember 5 was terrible. 6 was forgettable for me. I know it's a sweet spot for you.
It's a sweet spot for me
because Jason does come back.
Yeah.
Well, another thing we've got to talk about now, I think, is important is Tom Savini because. After the first one, I mean, the makeup is probably the best part about Part 1, in my opinion.
Right.
But he was somehow overlooked for 2 and 3, but they brought him back in for what they thought was going to be the final Friday the 13th movie.
Right. But wrapping up on just wrapping up on Part 3. I mean, for a budget of $2.2 million, it makes $36.7 million.
Yeah.
Fun fact: it knocks E.T. off the top spot.
Well, I mean, E.T. was number 1 for like 7 or 8 weeks.
But still, I mean,
it was the second
Friday the 13th.
It was the second highest grossing horror movie that year. Yeah, behind Poltergeist, which we may talk about at some point.
Right,
because that's interesting. Tobe Hooper directed it, but he wasn't supposed to direct it, even though he and Spielberg kind of came up with the concept. I think we can delve a little more into that because
Right.
I think that's interesting. How could you not have Tobe Hooper direct it? But anyhow,
Friday the 13th. We got some iconic kills. Like probably my favorite one's the handstand kill. All of these movies. As far as the gore and violence, all were subjected to severe cuts because
they had to avoid the X rating
for X rating because, and I know like that scene in particular, they went all out.
Yeah,
I mean
they cut him in half.
They cut him in half. Yeah, but they filmed like a really gruesome.
Well, and also the hammock, the couple on the bed, or they like totally disemboweled them and everything,
Right.
and they had to cut that out. We're saying the word "cut" a lot, and there's a lot of cuts.
There's a lot of cutting. I mean, a
lot of bloody cuts.
We didn't even talk about the biker gang that tries to crash the party and bumps into Mr. Voorhees. Unfortunately,
it was kind of like, okay, it kind of makes Shelley, right?
Yeah,
make him more of a not just an annoying figure. But at the same time, it's like it was kind of out of place. That was one thing that it was good, but that if I had to like pick it apart, the whole biker gang was kind of like superfluous. I can't say the word. Kind of unnecessary because it was funny in a way. They were distractions,
right?
But at the same time, it was like, okay, what it kind of took away the point of the.
It does.
It takes away the flow of part 3.
It does, but I mean, there also still is a bit of a point to it because, if the biker game doesn't show up at the farm, they don't drain the gas.
Yeah,
from
I know.
The RV.
I know.
So I mean, there is a chain reaction.
But you could technically, when if there was a gun happening to be around in the barn or something, they shot. Oh, the gas leaked. We didn't realize it leaked, and
right.
They could. I mean, it was just unnecessary to introduce 3 characters, and they spend a lot of time in the barn with 2 of them, and it's like,
right.
All right, let's get back to the focus here. It's like sometimes you have to snap these people out of it, and okay, let's focus on the story here. In radio, we focus on one thought per break. I think some of these filmmakers could just focus on one thing and see how that goes.
Right.
Because you have too many subplots, it kind of brings a movie down. It wasn't as bad as other movies I've seen.
Right.
But it was just that whole sequence could have been out. And they could have come up with some other way for the gas tank to be emptied. Mm-hmm. That's just my opinion on that.
Hey, you make a good point, with that. But all right, so from there we move on to Friday the 13th, Part 4, the final chapter. And again, if you're not paying attention or if you're not watching these movies literally back to back, you don't really catch that this literally happens
in one
moments after
each
movie. So like we literally start this movie by seeing Jason, on the ground in the barn,
right?
And we. Interestingly enough, I like how this movie starts because we bring Jason to the hospital, and you kind of see the aftermath of families hearing about their dead loved ones and stuff like that. So I mean, I thought that was a cool twist.
Well, it very, very morbid too. The morgue guy
the mortician.
getting the mortician getting it on with one of the nurses. It's like, you're doing that right in the morgue, dude. I mean, what a twisted. I mean, it was meant for dark humor, and I kind of went with it, but at the same time, it's like, who has sex in a morgue? I mean, really?
Right.
Well, I don't want to ask that question. That was a rhetorical one. I don't really want to know, to be honest. Oh my goodness!
So, Chris, for this movie, we do have a brand new director, Joseph Zito.
Yeah, how was it? Was he involved in the other ones? I think it was like what you said. The new producer brought in a whole new team, right?
Yeah, yes, Frank Mancuso. He does start making changes here.
Yeah,
and putting his more influence on the story. As you said a couple minutes ago, We get the returning special effects by the legendary Tom Savini.
Yeah.
And he doesn't disappoint in this.
No.
We Kimberly Beck starring, Corey Feldman.
Yeah, Corey Feldman.
I
I think he's probably the most well-known out of all the actors in the franchise, I would say.
Well, Crispin Glover, his very first movie.
Yeah, but Crispin Glover isn't.
This
Never
is
reached the
Back to the
heights
Future.
of
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not saying Corey Feldman went to like Tom Cruise superstar status, but out of all of the Friday the 13th movies, I think Corey Feldman was probably the most successful, perhaps, other than Kevin Bacon. Kevin Bacon, I guess, takes the cake, but as far as lead roles.
Yeah, Corey Feldman, I mean, he was in everything in the 80s.
Oh, yeah.
Just about, he
And him and Zito did not get along.
No, not at all.
Zito always thought of him as kind of a brat, but apparently Feldman in interviews didn't like Zito's approach.
Right.
So kind of butting of the heads, but I think it added to his performance, to be honest.
Yeah, and listen to Corey Feldman in interviews talk about this movie. He loved doing this movie.
Yeah.
He wanted to be in the sequel, part 5, because 5. It's interesting enough. These 3 movies take place within like a week of itself. Then the next 3 is like the Tommy Jarvis saga, and Tommy Jarvis is a prominent character in the next 3 movies. But Corey Feldman's only in the first one and makes a cameo in the 5th one.
It's a shame because they kind of leave it because they kind of wrap up the end of part 4 as he could potentially become Jason.
Yeah, and he personally wanted to do the sequels, but unfortunately Steven Spielberg said, no, you have to do the Goonies, and well, when Mr. Spielberg calls, you don't say no.
Right.
We this is probably the
most interesting, I would say.
Interesting, and probably what I get out of talking to fans, probably the most loved out of the franchise.
It could be, because they opened up, like, it wasn't, okay, yes, there's these campers, but there's this house next door, this family, kind of a broken family. The father, we don't really know where the father is.
Right.
You kind of assume he left somehow. They don't really talk about the dad too much.
Right.
But there's the dynamic is like they're not exactly like close. It seems like the brother and sister are close.
Right.
Like like Corey Feldman and his sister
Trish. Yep.
Trish. They both have a bond in there, but it comes even stronger by the end.
Sure.
So that was the part that kind of left me a little aloof. Is like they were trying. There was a few different things they were trying to do, it seemed. They didn't successfully do the whole brother-sister thing as well as they could have, potentially. Jeepers Creepers kind of brought it out even more, the strong bond of brother and sister. That's, out of horror movies, I think that was probably the best sibling bond.
Sure.
The first one. We're not going to get into the ones.
Right.
But I think they were trying to do something with that. And the whole family dynamic with the mom and everything, they were not successful in that, because the mom, you assume, just dies. You have, because they don't really do anything with the mom. There wasn't a cut scene.
Yeah, where they find her. Yeah,
it was like a dream sequence, kind of. They kind of allude that it could have been a dream, but it was cut, so you don't really know.
What was it, a dream? Because I thought it was during the chase that Trish finds.
I think it's near the end. I think it was at the very end.
Yeah.
The very end. I think it was very unclear.
Yeah.
Because I saw a little bit behind the scenes. You've seen these movies way more than I have.
Yeah.
But it just seemed that it was, even then, it was kind of like Jason standing behind her.
Yeah.
As she's seeing her mom in the bathtub. But again, I don't know if it was alluded to as a potential dream. Again, it was cut. So what we saw in the theatrical version was kind of a messy.
The mother
thing.
just kind of disappears.
Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know if it was a dream, but there is, a deleted scene where Trish finds her dead mother in the bathtub, and it's during the final chase through the cabin.
Right.
sadly though, I have to mention this because this is actually kind of breaking news.
Oh yeah, the actor. I sent you the info on this. I forgot about that. Yeah,
Eric.
Thank you for bringing that up.
Eric Anderson, who plays Rob.
Yeah,
he's the camper who's kind of hunting Jason.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, just a couple weeks ago, passed away.
He wasn't that old either.
He wasn't that old. So very sad. What was it? Cancer?
I think it might have been cancer.
Cancer. He was another one who you could always count on the convention circuits.
Yeah.
He was a fan favorite. I mean, his
but
favorite line. He's killing me. He's killing me.
Yeah.
Run away.
And that's the thing. You don't. That was another thing. You don't see him get killed either. And I guess Zito was saying they tried a couple of different things. They didn't want to because I guess it looked cheesy and corny, and people were laughing on the set and like, let's just make it more obscure. And I think they were better off doing it that way, to be honest. But again, his storyline, you throw too many storylines in here, things start getting a little messy with the plot.
Right.
His sister gets killed, right? Or something like that.
Yeah, it sounds like
again, it wasn't
his
clear.
Sister was one of the victims of the previous movie.
Yeah.
They don't really say which sister it is.
No, and it's kind of like it was very underdeveloped, and it was, I hate to say it, unnecessary.
Yeah.
Because to be honest, they're kind of the Trish and him were kind of flirting throughout the movie. Like there may have been something there, but nothing develops there. So it's almost like, I hate to say it, Rob was kind of a waste of time.
Right.
Where they could have just, again, focused more on the family dynamic more. And Rob just kind of shows up as a mysterious hiker, and they even allude for a few seconds that he could be the killer.
Jason, yeah.
And it's like, it was
we know Jason is the real Jason's out there.
We know, everyone know, the audience knows, but it was like there was no point in even for a second making Rob look like a killer.
Right.
But at the same point, it's like, why is Rob even in this movie?
Right.
Because it's just, it doesn't add anything to the movie. They tease a few things. My sister died in a previous massacre. Which they don't really develop that at all, which is kind of unfortunate.
Right.
So it's like, okay, he's kind of just in there for a distraction, and
right.
But they try to make him more important. So it's like they really didn't know what to do with him.
Yeah, I mean, again,
it's unfortunate.
Kind of like the biker gang. Like the payoff we get with his character is Tommy Jarvis finding his clippings of the Nomad,
right?
Young Jason, and then Tommy Jarvis, being a makeup artist himself, turns himself into child Jason to confuse and distract Jason as he's taken care of at the end. But
again, technically, he could have found those clippings anywhere, potentially.
He could have,
I mean, it was just like
Rob is the vehicle for that.
Yeah, and it's a vehicle that's not well developed, and it just kind of peters out. And there could have been a whole movie about Rob,
right?
You know what I mean?
They kind of do that in the 2009 remake with
I didn't watch that one.
What's his name? He played one of the Winchester guys, not Dean, the other one. I can't remember his name.
Yeah, 2009, Jason. I just totally ignored that movie, to be honest.
Well, I mean,
I'm sure it wasn't too bad.
It's not too bad. They called it a remake, but it was almost like a sequel than anything else. But I mean, that's for another discussion.
Yeah, it's just unfortunate because there could have been so much more to the Rob character, and it was just like a lot of interesting ideas, but they should have just left Rob off the table and maybe made it seemed like they wanted to keep going. They waited a couple years after this one before The New Beginning, which what a disaster.
That was different.
That was again the twist. Oh, it's a guy pretending to be Jason. The payoff wasn't that good.
I mean that movie had.
I mean, Corey Feldman was in it for a little bit.
A couple minutes in the beginning. And then it picks up like 10, 15 years later, and he's an adult now.
Yeah, it's like...
So, well, either way, back to, part 3. Again, we get another, like, cast of, just where we
You mean part 4, right?
Part 4, yes. Yeah. we're talking about so many movies right now.
Yeah, right.
I'm getting confused. I mean, we got the Doublemint twins. I mean, why not? We've had just about everything else in these movies.
Let's talk about Crispin Glover for a minute, because
Lawrence Monason, who is Ted, and then Crispin Glover as
this was Crispin
Jimmy.
Glover, like literally a year before Back to the Future came out.
Yes,
and Crispin Glover was another, like Betsy Palmer, Marlon Brando, Daniel Day-Lewis, De Niro, a method actor. He gets really into the roles. The dancing, oh my God!
Do you want to know a funny thing about that? And as goofy as it looks, he was dancing the on-set music that was Back in Black.
I know.
So
they didn't have the money to pay for the rights.
They paid AC/DCs, but I mean, so again, his dancing doesn't look that crazy and goofy if you're playing it to Back in Black. But what they had playing,
I know, it was like whoa. But Crispin Glover has always been one of those whoa kind of guys.
Yeah,
he definitely, from what I've read everywhere, he is difficult to work with.
I've heard that
to the
too.
extreme.
I've read that too. I mean, he sued the pants off of Back to the Future for likenesses. Yeah, and
it's a shame because going from this guy to playing George McFly, it's like this guy had a lot of promise as an actor.
He sure did, absolutely.
Because he wasn't the first choice. He wasn't Spielberg's first choice for Back to the Future.
No,
I can tell you that. But I mean, it's Crispin Glover is even dancing to Back in Black. It's still a really goofy.
It's still goofy.
I mean, everyone else is dancing normally, and he's just doing these outlandish moves.
It makes more sense, I guess.
Yeah, it kind of does. But even like, still, it's still really goofy dance.
Yeah,
and he actually is technically the ladies' man out of the bunch too.
He does, yes.
He just needed some confidence.
Yep.
So, and the twins didn't disappoint with him.
Not with him. They definitely disappointed Ted, though, our stoner.
Yeah.
Funny thing about him is apparently he had never smoked weed before.
Oh, so it really?
So he
did it for real on the set?
He did it for real and almost got fired because he was so out of it. He was having troubles with his lines, but he was like, well, I want to be, make this as authentic as it. So you see his bloodshot eyes. That's not Tom Savini. That was all him who did that.
Yeah, let's bring it back to Tom Savini for a minute, because there's.
Oh man,
I mean, there was some talks that him and the stunt guy there butted heads a little bit, but it's like I do my own stunts. And Tom's like, I do my own stunts too, and they bonded afterward after he kind of remembered that Tom Savini is a stunt guy too.
Sure.
In addition to his other many duties, and later on film director. But it's interesting how, because Jason does die.
Yes,
in this
they kill him.
Yeah, and he brought up a good point. Tom Savini's like, this whole movie, very quick kills. Let's draw the Jason thing out, like getting him through the eye, slow.
Oh, the machete to the side, and then seeing his head slide down the machete.
Yeah,
I mean, it makes you tingle just thinking about it.
Yeah, I know. It was a pretty gruesome. It's the most gruesome kill I'd say out of all of them
in the probably in the entire franchise.
Yeah. But it was great how they had the idea of cutting the mask off first.
Yeah, well, you want to make sure you see it and get all the emotion out of
right.
And again, my favorite Jason played by Ted White, older man. I mean, he was probably in his close to 50 when he did this movie.
Have that much energy in that.
Yeah, and he did purposely isolate himself from the rest of the cast because he wanted them to be scared of him.
Right.
So they
were
into and again,
what's her name who played Trish? There's a lot of genuine emotion there.
Yeah, I mean, and after the movie, they all became friends. Oh yeah, they understood where he was coming from. But yeah, he definitely stepped up the aggressiveness of Jason.
The most aggressive Jason at the time.
Yeah, and I mean, Kane Hodder's aggressive, but again, what I liked about Ted White the most is he went after these kids. Like he ran,
literally
he left.
Yeah.
He didn't move like a robot and just happened to catch them.
No. You could tell he got
was into it. Yeah.
Yes.
and probably my favorite effect in the scene is not the Jason's final demise. It's when he's in the morgue and they put him in the ice cabinet and they shut it and you can see Jason's breath.
Yeah.
To me, that is one of the most creepy scenes.
It's very subtle too.
Yeah, it's subtle, but when you catch it, it gets you.
Yeah, it's surprisingly subtle for the series.
Yeah, but it's just one of those little, extra things that they put in there that just makes you tingle. Like, you think, Jason's dead. He's in the morgue. He's about to be disembodied. Well, no.
Right.
He's still kicking and nobody knows.
Right. No, it's overall probably, in my opinion, the best of the franchise.
Yes. Yeah. I have a big soft spot for part 6, but if I, my arm is twisted and I have to pick a favorite of the franchise, it's definitely part 4.
Yeah. And again, even though there's a lot of stuff in there that's underwhelming, a lot of plot points that are kind of just not explored and they're not as satisfying and some of them could have been thrown out entirely. It's still in all, especially I think a lot of it has to do with Corey Feldman's performance because the look on his face when he's hugging his sister at the end.
Yeah,
it's like, ooh, this guy could become Jason. It's like Apocalypse Now,
right?
Where Willard becomes Colonel Kurtz at the end of Apocalypse Now. It's that type of, and it's like, man, I wish they would have explored that one better. Right, I really do.
I also want to give a little shout out to Judy Anderson. Because her death was quite torturous. That's true. She's the one who gets killed in the raft.
Yeah.
Well, what's unless you've watched any of the documentaries, what you don't know is she spent over 18 hours in 36-degree water, totally naked.
Yeah. Yeah. There was no like naked suits like they have now.
Yeah.
It was. She was really naked.
And she troopered through that. So, I mean, hats off to her for, enduring that because, and again, that's another one of the more iconic kills in the movie, seeing her, get the arrow.
Surprisingly quiet, too.
Yeah. Yeah. But, Friday the 13th, part 4 is my favorite of the series.
Mine, too.
And
easily.
These 3 movies in particular are the best that I feel the series has to offer. Now, I know all the Kane Hodder fans are probably damning us right now. I love Kane Hodder. I think his performances as Jason are fantastic. But just personal opinion, as I watch the whole series, these are my 3 favorite, and again...
Story-wise. We got to talk about the story because... They just went off in these different directions and the rest of them that just, to me, don't add up. And it was just a matter of time. Jason in space. It's like, oh, come on.
Well, yeah, I
know Kane Hodder's great. I'm not taking anything away from him, but it's just like,
well, that was more.
Really?
They did that more just to maintain the rights to get to Freddy vs. Jason.
Yeah, I know, but
even still, again, that's
even Freddy versus Jason was. It was almost like Jet Li and Jackie Chan teaming up for Forbidden Kingdom. Oh, and then it's like,
yeah. Well, I mean, we can do a Freddy versus Jason show in the future.
I don't know if I want to sit through that.
But the backstory to get there is such a fascinating story. I think it'd be worth doing a show on, but. I mean, that's for another time. But these 3 movies, and again, the reason why we pick these 3 movies is if you don't know or you've never been noticed, they do happen within the span of a week, week and a half, which is really, really interesting, which is really cool. So basically, you get a whole tour of Camp Crystal Lake,
right?
Because it happens different areas on the lake.
Different parts of the country too.
I mean, if you know where they filmed it and stuff like that. But,
us geeks do, but
But
what do you think? This is interesting because it's like an unofficial trilogy. We know Halloween's had a couple of different trilogies thrown out through the franchise.
Unofficial trilogies.
This is like an unofficial trilogy within the Friday the 13th. Are these your favorite Jason movies? Mm-hmm. Just comment below. You can reach out to us through Facebook. X, formerly known as Twitter, and Instagram. Just let us know what you think. Are these the best Friday the 13th movies? Do you totally disagree with us? Hey, comment below. Hopefully you're tactful if you hate our opinions, but just get in contact with us. Let us know what you think.
Get in on the conversation.
We appreciate the comments. We don't always log in and reply back. We're sorry about that, but we do appreciate your comments and feedback. So just comment below. Don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe, so you never miss an episode of Scared for Real. So we tip our hats, and that's a cool thing. If you want to get like a Blu-ray, because I don't think they've released any of the Friday the 13th in any 4Ks yet.
I don't think so, but I'm sure it's coming.
Yeah, I mean there was that 8-film franchise thing they did for the first 8 Jason movies in the DVD form.
Yep.
But Shout Factory, if you can afford it, massive box set with all of the Friday the 13th movies in one set, and including the 3D version of part 3 as well. So again, I mean, there's so many options. You can stream these on Max, I believe, right? Or
yes, they are on Max and then Paramount as well.
But if you're a huge fan of any film, I always highly recommend that you just go ahead and buy the Blu-ray, the 4K, the DVD, because streaming sites, as we've known, we're a lot of people are starting to know even more, they lose rights to these films and then they disappear. If you have them in your collection, they don't leave. So I always like to get the disc if I'm a huge fan.
Yeah, there's so many more things we can talk about Friday the 13th, but these 3 movies really are the best of the franchise.
Right.
And if you really enjoy the backstory and the dirt and the how they did it, I highly recommend the 12-part Camp Crystal Lake documentary.
It's like over 4 hours long.
It's fantastic. It's right up there with. It was made by the same people who did Never Sleep Again. They did the same thing with Nightmare on Elm Street.
Right.
It's a fantastic documentary, and it's also based off the book. His Name Was Jason. So there's so much to be learned about these movies. There's so much to be said. Fortunately, a lot of the cast members are still alive to tell their stories. And
there was even like a book that was made. Some guy really delved into they allowed him to go onto the Paramount lot. I forget. It was a documentary in one of the DVDs.
Yeah.
Guy literally documented as much as he could in one book. So there's a lot of information about Friday the 13th that you can easily find.
Yeah. So again, happy summer. This is a nice, what better way to kick off summer, Chris, with some Friday the 13th. It's one of the ultimate, summer.
Yeah, splash of water, splash of blood, a few cuts here and there.
Just think twice before jumping into that lake.
Yeah, and think about some of the things you're doing. Are you disobeying the law? Are you going against? Are you cheating? If you're doing something despicable, Jason could be lurking.
We'll see you next time on Scared for Reals.